Hello. So today is going to be um an episode about Twitch. So I got a mini rework for Twitch. Um, the actual suggestions are very simple. So what I want to do is more talk about why the suggestion rather than what is the suggestion, because they're very simple. I mean, there's actually just two big changes, right? So it's more like a mini rework, really, and I want to talk about why. So there are three-ish builds right now for Twitch: AP, which kind of sucks, attack speed, which kind of sucks, and crit, which is currently the best. And by attack speed, I mean on hit build, right? That's the build that I'm kind of going for in this game, but it's still not good. I should have went for some different builds, but ignore this game. So I wanted to kind of make it a bit more directed on what kind of build should Twitch expect, because in my opinion, what the fuck is an epiblum? Brain, what the fuck? In my opinion, the problem with some reworks is that they leave the character kind of in a weird scenario where it's not fully figured out what he wants to be. And that's also a problem with a lot of new champions. Like, for example, Zeri. A lot of her scaling is AP, but a lot of that hinges around her Q, which is only AD. A Q active, obviously. So it's really weird. The scaling makes no sense, which is why you see shit like Trinity Force, Trinity Force and Titanic Hydra, right? You see it because the scaling is so wonky and weird. So, like, sitting on flat damage that you can constantly apply is the way to go for her. And I think Renata has a similar problem, kinda, where it's not fully figured out what she wants to be or what she wants to build. Even though that's less of her problem, but I'm not here to talk about Renata, I'm here to talk about Twitch. So, in my opinion, a good rework should like scrape the edges of a champion, especially when you talk about like mini reworks, obviously. So I want to focus on an AP build and a crit slash attack speed build. In my opinion, it should be a pure attack speed build, because that's what makes sense to me on him. But, and I will explain that later, is if Riot feels like pure on hit is not good for ADCs, like they feel like crit should be more of what ADCs build, then there are some changes that would make crit viable. But in my opinion, it should be a pure hyper carry attack speed build. So let's talk about the passive. This is a new passive, kinda. It's a change to the passive. Instead of there's two major changes. The first one is that instead of every 1 second it applies its damage, it applies every 0.25 seconds. So it applies 4 times per second, but only up to 2 seconds. So it applies its damage 8 times. So obviously that numbers are up to balancing. Obviously, numbers are up to balancing. But let's say it's like a 23, right? So 23, 23, 23, 23, 23, like 8 times. Does that make sense? I think that should be about 200 something, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, approximately 200 something, right? But it applies it quick. And, actually 23 might be a bit too much, but anyway. It doesn't matter, right? Numbers are up to balancing. It applies it quick, but only for 2 seconds. And the second major change is that instead of being capped at 5 stacks, it has no cap. So the only actual cap it has is the amount of attacks you can land in. In addition, the damage scales massively with AP. So the idea here is that AP would be more into burst, so you could stack only a few of them, right? You could, like, with like you could do like, I don't know, like, it depends on obviously attack speed. You will probably build Nash's Tooth, so you get a little bit more attack speed, but you're limited very much when you build like pure AP. So that's the idea here, right? If you build AP, then you're locked by your attack, but the burst damage is high because it deals a lot of burst damage. But you don't get as many stacks. That's important, especially for later. So, but if you're building normally, then your only cap is your attack speed, and the damage you deal is actually per attack speed. Obviously, like the damage um, applies onto each other, if that makes any sense. It's not like it refreshes the duration. You stack multiple stacks, obviously. Not obviously, but that's the way it works. So, let's say you stack once, so it starts ticking down, and then like when it reaches 1 second, you stack another one. So then you have another one. So the first one finishes in a second, but then you have the second one you stacked, which will finish in another second. They don't refresh each other's duration. You stack individually, but they apply the damage at the same time. Does that make any sense? Hopefully it does. That's the idea. Instead of applying the... So it doesn't refresh the duration. It's you just stack multiple on top of each other. So you are limited by the attack speed, because by the time you'll stack another stack, then the last stack would already be over. So you are limited by the attack speed you have, which would feel so good, because right now, like, you build a lot of attack speed, and that's kind of cool because you get to 5 stacks easier. That's the whole idea. You get to 5 stack easier, then you press your E, and then the rest of the damage is kind of lacking, which is why you don't really see a lot of a Conqueror build or Lethal Tempo build, which used to be good, but is now no longer the main build for him. That's really it, because why would you? After you've dealt your 5 stacks, and you have your Q, and then you hit your E, then there isn't really too many reasons to auto attacks. Obviously you do, because you can crit or deal on hit, but it feels lacking when it comes to his base kit. Why would you want to limit yourself, something like that? Any other hyper carry would not limit, but would build on top of that damage. For him, it just feels like you want to reach that threshold as fast as possible, which is why you build attack speed. So this should hopefully make way more sense. Now for the Q is unchanged. I personally feel like he shouldn't have an invisibility, but I couldn't find any better idea. I didn't want to change him majorly. I didn't want to give him like a full-on actual rework. More like mini rework changes. I didn't really want to give him like a full-on change to one of his core abilities. So it's unchanged. But I do feel like he shouldn't have an invisibility. So now to the W, which is the big splash on the ground that slows. The main change is slow, instead of scaling with AP, scales with AD. But the amount of it deals damage now. It deals like the burst of damage scales massively with AP. Other than that, it works the exact same way. And once again, the idea is to stack as much as you can with your W if you're building attack speed, or AD, obviously. So if you build AD, then you're going to slow them for longer, which means you're going to be able to stack more stacks. They're slowed, plus you'll auto attack them, plus because they are standing on top of it, they get stacked. So you stack with your auto attacks, you stack with your W, and because they're slowed and standing on the W, then you keep stacking on them. So building AD allows you to stack more stacks. But if you're building AP, then it deals burst of damage plus a little bit of slow to help you stack more. Once again, the idea is AP's burst build, and AD is the more as much stacks as you can. And then the E, I think functions the same. I don't really have any change to add. The only change I would add, obviously, like, the damage it deals will scale per stack, but you can now stack more stacks or less stacks, so, and the damage will scale with AP. That's pretty much how it works right now. I might want to make it to it scales with crit, and that's maybe also your passive will scale a little bit of the damage with crit. Once again, that's up to Riot if they want to push him to a crit build or not. If they do, then make the E scale with crit and the passive scale with crit. If not, if they don't want to push him to crit, then leave it as it is. Scale with the E scales with AP. And that's the thing it should be. I think it should only scale with AP. I don't think it should scale with AD. So the real damage that it deals is based on your stacks. Obviously, a lot of this numbers is going to need to be fine-tuned. You don't want too much damage for it to deal. Then the early burst damage will be way too high. But obviously, because you are limited on the amount of stacks you do, so you probably want it to have more damage than it currently is, but the scaling of AP, once again, numbers need to be balanced properly. So, but it basically functions the same, right? It basically functions the same. It's just because your passive is different, then it has to function a bit differently. And the ult obviously stays the same. So that's my Twitch rework. A lot of it is actually the passive rework. It's a mini rework. Obviously, it's not a massive rework. It's just fine-tuning a lot of his problems right now. He doesn't feel rewarding, and he doesn't feel satisfying to use, and the builds always feel like they contradict each other. Instead of the every build feeling good, it feels like you want a bit of everything, but you don't have the items to work with on that, so it feels like you're limited because your kit is limited, not because items are limited. You're not like Aphelios when you're like, wait, I want to build this item, I want to build like Borg, but if I build Borg, then I can't get to high crit, which means that a lot of my other attacks are limited. Aphelios feels limited by the items. There is an item, the optimized build on Aphelios feels limiting. If you've ever noticed, if you look like competitive and you see way too many different builds on Aphelios, and that really happens because the best build on him is just not optimized. It's not optimized at all. But Twitch doesn't feel this way. Twitch doesn't feel limited by the items. He feels limited by his kit because his kit is so limiting that no build path works for him. This would help him optimize based on items. So the current items plus later item changes would always feel rewarding for him rather than limiting. So that's the changes. That's it. The game goes on for longer, but really no need to look at that.